Freedom Central is talking to the South African writer Linda Smith in her hometown of Durban. Linda, it's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you for giving me your time.
My pleasure.
And I really wanted to speak to you about the work you're doing and the journey that you're currently on, and how you came to be on this journey communicating this message.
Well, Mel, it's very interesting. I was born in South Africa. I have very little recall of that life, but when I was about 3 or 4 years old, I remember traveling by steam train up into Africa. We went over the spray of the Victoria Falls Bridge and on towards the Congo, and the train stopped at a town called Mutwa, which is the second largest town in now Zambia, then Northern Rhodesia. And that's where I grew up. My father had left South Africa 9 months earlier to go and work on the copper mine there. So I had the privilege of growing up in the Federation of Southern Rhodesia, Northern Rhodesia and Nyasaland. I grew up in the real Africa, the raw, the wild, the beautiful Africa, the Africa romanced by people dreaming about adventure. That Africa was a very beautiful and peaceful place. We knew no fear, even though we had lions walking into the town and, you know, there were wild animals all over. It was absolutely fantastic. We enjoyed wonderful freedom living up there. Unfortunately, on Sunday the 11th of July 1960, which also happened to be my 9th birthday and the Rhodes and Founders holiday, the violence that was brewing in the Belgian Congo after the Congolese had received again the independence from the Belgian Congo on the 30th of June, that day, 11th of July, broke out into full-scale war. And it was the most traumatic and horrendous day of my life. The refugees flew across, well, in their cars, came across the border in their thousands. The cars were sprayed with bullets, smeared with blood, and they were literally bumper to bumper. They fled with whatever they could grab and put in their cars. Some fled with nothing. Some fled without their wives and their children. Some children were left behind in the most horrendous savage slaughter you could ever imagine. Fortunately for them, some of the miners from Mufulira and Nkana mines got in their own cars and drove into the Congo. They drove into all of that to go and collect the people who had been left behind. And that has left such an indelible impression on me, that people would do that. Where we lived in Mufulira was a mere 10 miles from the Congo border. So the whole onslaught of that hit our town. After that, life was still fantastic. Things still carried on nicely, but things were certainly changing. In 1960, the British Prime Minister, Sir Harold Macmillan, came to South Africa and gave his Wind of Change speech. And that started a storm in southern and central Africa. And nothing was the same again anymore. Britain had promised in writing and verbally that the Federation, the last outpost of the British Empire, would never be split up. Britain blatantly lied, she cheated, her behavior was just disgusting. And in December 1963, the Federation was split up. In July 1964, Nyasaland became Malawi, and under the dictatorship of Dr. Hastings Banda, they lived a very difficult life, the rural people, after that. I've got to tell you, to the rural people, to the African people of Central Africa, politics meant absolutely nothing. When they were asked, what are your views on politics, they would say things like, mina haikona hazi, mina funa bicycle. I don't know, I want a bicycle. And these poor people were not left alone. They were manipulated, they were tortured. At night the knives and the sticks came out and they were beaten into submission. They were told when they asked questions, but we don't know anything about the money and the wealth of the country. How are we going to manage that? And they were told, no, people overseas will just give you lots of money, and you know, everything's going to be served to you on a platter. Life is going to be great. Anyway, on United Nations Day, may I point out, 24th of October, 1964, Northern Rhodesia, which was the second wealthiest country in Africa, was given independence from Britain, and under the rule of Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, who was a school teacher, was brought to ruin and brought to its knees in no time at all. The country was bankrupt, the people were starving. The white people left in mass because of the murders, which is similar to what is going on in South Africa. Southern Rhodesia became known as Rhodesia, and under the leadership of Ian Smith, who did absolutely everything to get all the people of Rhodesia working together. He had all the tribal chiefs in his parliament, all the headmen, everyone had a voice in his government. But Britain would not acknowledge the legitimate leaders of the African people. She would only acknowledge the terrorists, the ones that she had placed in, you know. So this orchestrated a war. During the 10-year Bush War, which was the most hectic, grueling, terrible war you could ever imagine, 20,000 people lost their lives. The fighting continued until there was a manipulation to move Robert Mugabe into to head up the country. I think it was in 1983, he sent his North Korean trained 5th Brigade troops into opposition tribal areas and had over 40,000 people slaughtered. Over 40,000 African people slaughtered. And once again we waited for Britain's condemnation, and we were deafened by the silence. You know, I began to realize that nothing we heard on the news was true. From little, I sensed that. And I had an aversion to newspapers. I never read newspapers because I don't believe 99% of what is in them. I had this intuitive sense that it wasn't true, and I always wondered, how could I ever find the truth of what was really going on? Anyway, because of all this, I moved to South Africa, and it's been great. I love the country, I love the people, but it's not the same. And there isn't a day in my life when I don't want to go home to my country and live the peaceful life that I lived.
Yeah.